Crying again, Nina? What the hell is wrong with you? The voice cracked through the stale air like a whip. Customers flinched. A few looked up from their carts, then quickly looked away. Behind checkout lane 4, Nina Matthews stood frozen, her hand still hovering above a pack of frozen peas, her eyes wide with embarrassment. She didn't answer, just swallowed hard and whispered, "Sorry, Mr. Carson, I'm fine." Rick Carson, broad-shouldered, red-faced, and reeking of caffeine and ego, slammed his clipboard down on the counter hard enough to make a pen roll off the edge. "I don't pay people to fall apart during their shift," he growled, loud enough for the whole front end to hear. "You got problems? Handle them on your own time. You want to cry? Go stock tissues in aisle 9. Nina blinked fast, but it was too late. A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away with the back of her hand and forced herself to smile at the elderly woman waiting with 2 cans of soup and a loaf of bread. Her voice trembled. "Hi there. Did you find everything okay?" Rick grunted and stormed off, his heavy boots pounding toward the back office. Isaiah Brooks had seen enough. He stood 2 aisles down, pretending to browse baked beans, but his eyes hadn't left Nina once. The man he used to be, the scrappy dreamer who started Brooksmart from a corner stall in Montgomery, would have marched straight to the front and fired Rick on the spot. But that's not who Isaiah was now. Now, he was the CEO, the founder, the face on the company brochure, the one who signed the checks, shook hands with investors, and approved expansions from Florida to Kansas. Somewhere along the line, he'd started trusting reports more than people. And yet, none of those spreadsheets ever captured what he was seeing right now. A cashier holding back tears under flickering fluorescent lights, trying to act like being humiliated in front of strangers was just part of the job. Isaiah clenched his jaw. He remembered the letter. A week ago. No return address. Just a few handwritten lines. "If you care about your people, come see store number 14 in Greenville, before there's nothing left to see." He'd thought it was a prank. Regional management had laughed it off. Gen Z whining again, they said. Probably mad about not getting Saturday off. But now, he wasn't laughing. He shifted to the side and peeked around a shelf of canned soup. Nina was scanning groceries like a robot, eyes red, shoulders stiff, voice flat. No one offered help. No one offered kindness. The other cashiers stared ahead like ghosts, afraid of being the next target. Isaiah stepped further into the store, passing through aisles that should have been vibrant with conversation. Instead, silence hung heavy. Displays were crooked. Stock carts blocked paths. A cracked sign that read, "Fresh every day," had fallen sideways, and no one had bothered to pick it up. At the deli counter, a customer tapped the bell 3 times. No one came. In the produce section, an onion had rolled to the floor. Its skin was dry, the edge of it flattened by footsteps. Isaiah bent to pick it up, instinctively. But when he stood, there was no one nearby to hand it to. He had built this place with pride. Every store bore his name. Brooksmart meant something once. Clean aisles, respectful staff, warmth in every corner. What had happened here? Back in the parking lot, the sun dipped low behind the trees. Isaiah sat in his rental, watching as employees trickled out, some in pairs, most alone. Then Nina came out, her shoulders hunched under the weight of the evening. She moved toward an old Ford sedan, burgundy paint faded, and a plastic bag covering one of the side mirrors. She stopped, opened her wallet, nothing but coins, and a receipt, then dropped into a crouch next to the rear tire. Her hands covered her face. Her shoulders trembled. Isaiah stayed in his seat. He didn't want to be seen. Not yet. Because what he was witnessing wasn't just about one bad manager. This wasn't just poor supervision. This was rot quiet, slow, and dangerous. He whispered to himself, "How many more are breaking in silence?" Isaiah didn't say a word. He just sat there, watching a woman fall apart in a parking lot she didn't deserve to cry in. And maybe for the first time in years, he really saw her. If this moment moved you, if you've ever known someone quietly breaking under the weight of everyday cruelty, tap the like button to show you're watching too. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because someone nearby might be carrying the same silence and they need to know they're not alone. The next morning, he showed up at store number 14 not in a blazer or business shoes, but in khakis and a dark blue Brooksmart polo shirt. On his chest, a visitor badge that read, Ike, temporary staff. He passed Rick in the break room. Rick didn't even look up. Perfect. Isaiah smiled grimly to himself. Time to go to work. Ike, dry goods aisle 3. Stack those rice bags tighter. Rick says it looks sloppy. The voice came from a girl no older than 20, chewing gum and tapping her pen against a clipboard. Isaiah gave a polite nod and wheeled his cart toward the aisle without a word. No one recognized him. No one cared. Just another temporary body filling space in a store that had forgotten how to breathe. He'd only been on the floor 20 minutes, and already the cracks in the foundation were clearer than any report he'd read. Half-stocked shelves, expired labels still on display, employees moving with the caution of soldiers in hostile territory. No one made eye contact. No one laughed. He'd designed this chain to feel like community, family. But this was survival. As Isaiah crouched to realign the rice bags, he heard someone approach. Soft steps, nervous energy. You're the new guy, huh? He looked up to see a young man with shaggy brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read Jalen. Yeah, Isaiah replied, wiping his hands. Name's Ike. Jalen offered a tight smile. Welcome to the quietest store in Alabama. Isaiah chuckled. It's that bad, huh? Jalen lowered his voice, glancing around. It didn't used to be. Last year, this place had music, teamwork. Now it's like a funeral home with fluorescent lights. What changed? Jalen hesitated. Rick mostly. He came in, said we needed to tighten operations. Started cutting hours, shuffling shifts without warning. If you ask questions, you get less hours the next week. If you speak up for someone, you get written up. Isaiah's chest tightened. That cashier up front, Nina. She okay? Jalen's eyes darkened. Nina's probably the kindest person here. She trains every new hire, picks up shifts no one wants. But her kid's sick. Asthma. She had to miss 2 nights because he was in the ER. Rick cut her schedule in half after that. Said she's unreliable. Isaiah stood there, silent, gripping the edge of the cart tighter. Jalen added, She doesn't complain though. Just keep showing up. You know, quietly breaking. Those words hit harder than any profit and loss sheet ever could. The day moved slowly. Isaiah took mental notes as he moved through the aisles. Linda in frozen foods looked exhausted, her eyes glassy as she checked expiry dates. Jorge in dairy had a limp he tried to hide. 2 teenage employees argued in whispers about being scheduled back-to-back overnight shifts during school exams. But no one talked aloud. That was the rule now. Speak softly, or not at all. During lunch break, Isaiah found an empty vending machine room. He bought a granola bar and leaned against the far wall, eyes closed. He remembered a time when he knew every name on every payroll, when he'd bring sandwiches to night crew and sit with them just to hear how their shifts went. He'd pulled out his wallet and unfolded the letter again. 4 sentences in loopy, rushed handwriting. This store is drowning. Not from theft, from fear. I thought you should know before someone sinks for good. Isaiah had kept it in his jacket pocket ever since. A silent challenge, a guilt trip, a call to arms. He didn't realize someone had entered the room until he heard muffled sobs. He turned his head slightly. Behind the stack of vending machines, barely visible, someone sat on the floor. It was Nina. Her face was buried in her hands. Her voice, when it came, was ragged, broken between hiccups. I can't do this anymore. I've tried. I come in every day. I smile. I even covered for Rick's girlfriend when she no-showed. And now I'm down to 10 hours? I can't feed my kid with that. I can't even pay for gas. Silence. Then another voice. Young. Male. Quiet. Rick's coming after me too, Jalen whispered. He told me if I call out sick again, he'll cut me down to weekends only. I didn't call out, Nina said through clenched teeth. My son had an asthma attack. He was turning blue. I called. I begged. He said I was making excuses. Isaiah didn't move. Couldn't move. Every word they spoke stabbed deeper than any boardroom criticism ever had. He could feel it, that heavy, invisible chain of silent suffering pulling his store into darkness. That night, Isaiah didn't drive back to the corporate condo on the other side of town. Instead, he checked into a cheap motel across the street. Dingy carpet, peeling wallpaper, a slow ceiling fan that ticked like a broken clock. He laid out a notebook on the desk and began writing names. Nina, Jalen, Linda, Jorge, one by one. Next to each name, he noted every detail he could recall. Shifts, complaints, silent glances, physical signs of fatigue. He added a small star next to Nina's name and circled it twice. She was the heart of the store, and they had tried to erase her. He poured a cup of weak motel coffee and sat by the window, watching the parking lot of Brooksmart glow faintly in the dark. One car after another pulled away. One light at a time went off. He didn't sleep. At 5:30 the next morning, Isaiah changed into the same uniform, tucked in the same polo, clipped on the same name tag, Ike, temp staff. He had one mission now: find the root, cut it clean, and give his people their voices back. Ike, you're on serial duty this morning. Keep it tidy. No lazy stacking. Rick barked the order as he walked past without looking. His coffee sloshed in a mug that read, World's Best Boss. The irony was almost too much to bear. Isaiah merely nodded, rolling the cart of restock boxes down the aisle as if he'd been working this store for years. The store was half awake. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The air still carried that mix of burnt coffee and cleaning chemicals. But the tension, that low hum of quiet misery, was everywhere. Isaiah felt it in the silence between greetings, in the way cashiers kept their heads low, and in how employees flinched when Rick's heavy boots echoed behind them. Jalen was already restocking pasta. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, and his left shoulder slouched like he'd slept poorly. When he spotted Isaiah, he gave a tired smile. You survived yesterday? Barely, Isaiah replied. Place seems tense. Jalen snorted. That's the polite word for it. Isaiah paused, then lowered his voice. You mentioned Nina's schedule got cut after her son's hospital trip? Jalen nodded, stuffing a box of elbow macaroni on the shelf. Yeah, she gave notice. Called, emailed. Rick said it didn't matter. She missed the shifts, so now he calls her part-time liability. Isaiah felt something in his chest tighten. And others? He asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Jalen looked around, then leaned in. Linda in frozen goods, she's working overnight 5 days straight. Her kid's in high school. Jorge's on doubles 3 times a week. Marcia only gets Sunday mornings now, which makes no sense since she's one of the fastest checkers. It's like he punishes people for having lives. Isaiah nodded slowly, each name a silent alarm bell. I saw your name in the office yesterday, Jalen added, glancing sideways. New temp list. You're on for 18 hours this week. Lucky me. Not really, Jalen said flatly. Anything under 20 hours means no health coverage and no stability. Welcome to the bottom tier. Isaiah exhaled quietly and bent to stock a box of cereal. In his mind, he was already charting names, hours, shift patterns. The spreadsheet he'd seen last month, colorful, efficient, and full of lies, came back to him now. He had approved it with a signature, the same signature that had built this company from scratch. Now it was being used to cut hours for mothers and overworked teenagers. And Rick Carson? He was manipulating it like a puppeteer behind a curtain. Later that afternoon, During shift transition, Isaiah found his chance. Rick had stepped out for a smoke, and the assistant manager had gone home early. Isaiah slipped quietly into the side office under the guise of checking the backstock list. The room smelled like cheap air freshener and spilled energy drinks. He sat at the desk and pulled out the keyboard. He still had an old admin-level login emergency credential buried under a technical account. He hadn't used it in years, but now, his fingers moved with practiced ease. The screen flickered to life. He navigated to the scheduling database, typed, Matthews, Nina. The page loaded. Week 1 to 31 hours. Week 2 to 26 hours. Week 3 to 17 hours. This week, 9 hours. Next week, unassigned. Internal note, emotional, unreliable, childcare issues. Isaiah stared at the screen, pulse rising. He typed in other names. Jalen West. Assigned, 19 hours, night shifts. Internal note, talks too much, low compliance. Linda Graham, 5 consecutive graveyard shifts. Marsha Little, only Sundays every week, for 3 months. Note, pushy, requests too many accommodations. He shifted to another tab. Carson, Rick, no shifts, but 5 consecutive approvals of efficiency improvement bonuses. Each entry stamped, approved by regional, but the digital signature trail ended with his own name. Isaiah sat back in the chair, the heat rising behind his eyes. Rick wasn't just careless. He was strategic, ruthless, rewarded for keeping staffing numbers low and expenses lower by turning the schedule into a weapon. Bleed hours from the vulnerable, inflate the performance metrics, keep upper management happy. Isaiah's hand trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded letter. Before there's nothing left to see, now he saw it all. Just as he logged out, the office door clicked open. Isaiah spun in his chair, heart racing. It was Nina. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought..." Isaiah smiled gently. "Just checking the paper towel order," he said, standing. Nina hesitated. "You're new, right, Ike?" He nodded. "Yeah." She gave a faint smile, then lowered her gaze. "Be careful around Rick. He doesn't like people in here." Isaiah studied her sunken eyes, the worn-down edge to her voice, the way she clutched her pocket as if to brace herself from falling apart. "You've worked here long?" he asked softly. 5 years, she said. "But lately it feels like I just survive here." Isaiah wanted to say something then, something more than polite comfort, something that told her the weight wasn't hers to carry alone. But not yet. Not here. "Well, I hope it gets better," he said. Nina didn't respond. She just nodded once and left the room. That night, Isaiah sat at the same motel desk, spreading out a legal pad. He scribbled names, notes, patterns. Every slash of the pen was a crack in the wall Rick had built. In the middle of the page, he wrote in all caps, "Schedule equals control equals abuse." Then, he circled Nina's name 3 times and drew a line under it. He would not let this place bury her. Tomorrow, it wouldn't be about pretending anymore. It would be about exposing everything. The morning air was thick with humidity when Isaiah stepped through the automatic doors of Brooksmart, his name tag still reading, Ike, his purpose sharper than ever. No longer was he just observing. Today, he was hunting for truth, for the full extent of the damage, and for the moment to bring it all down. Jalen greeted him near the back room with a tired nod. "Frozen section today. Watch your back. Rick's in a mood." Isaiah gave a faint smile. "When is he not?" Jalen didn't laugh. Inside the frozen aisle, the air was sharp and dry. Linda stood on a metal step stool, hanging a new price label on the ice cream freezer. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and the circles under her eyes looked even darker than yesterday. "You doing okay?" Isaiah asked gently. lifting a heavy box of frozen peas and slotting it into the shelf. Linda startled slightly, then sighed. 5 days of graveyards will do that to you. But hey, I still have a job, right? He tilted his head. 5 in a row? She nodded, rubbing her lower back. 11 to 7, same every night. I begged for one swing shift so I could be home from my son's football games. Rick said, you don't get to cherry-pick schedules. Isaiah looked at her for a long moment. And corporate lets that slide? Linda chuckled bitterly. Corporate doesn't see us. We're just colored blocks on a digital chart. She stepped down, adjusted her name tag, and moved on without another word. Isaiah stood frozen. Her last sentence echoed in his mind. Colored blocks on a chart. Not people, not parents, not employees trying to make ends meet. Just data points to manipulate. After his shift ended, he waited. Rick was always the last to leave on Thursdays, staying late under the guise of paperwork. But mostly, as Isaiah knew, to manipulate schedules after everyone had clocked out. At 8:45 p.m., when the store had thinned out, Isaiah returned to the side office. He waited until Rick stepped outside to take a call, then slipped inside quickly and shut the door. He logged back into the admin account. This time, he wasn't just looking at Nina's record, she was reviewing everyone's. It was worse than he'd feared. Linda, 5 consecutive overnights, back to back, with less than 8 hours off. Jalen, alternating graveyard and morning shifts. One note, low energy equals lazy. Marcia, only Sundays. Internal tag, high risk for HR, keep silent. Jorge, 2 double shifts a week, then a 12-hour break, then another double. His last performance note simply read, compliant. Isaiah's stomach turned. The schedule wasn't just flawed, it was tactical. He clicked into Rick's own entries. He found dozens of shift changes marked without employee consent. Weekly bonuses for efficiency, approved via auto-routed requests to corporate. The requests looked clean, but they were padded, inflated. There were even hours shaved from payroll reports, reallocating unused labor funds into discretionary manager bonuses, Rick's bonuses. Isaiah printed 4 pages of internal logs, shift edits, notes, memos. They painted a clear picture. Rick was punishing employees by weaponizing their hours. Fewer hours meant no health coverage. Inconsistent shifts meant childcare became impossible. The ones who questioned it were silenced. The ones who stayed quiet were stretched to the edge. Then came the final straw. He found a note added just 2 days ago, under Nina's profile. Final warning. Seen crying in front of customers. Reduced to weekend closing only. Isaiah stared at the line. Seen crying. Punished for being human. He clicked print. At 9:10 p.m., Rick returned. He opened the door to find Isaiah standing at the desk, 4 printed pages in hand, eyes steady. Rick blinked. You shouldn't be in here. Isaiah said nothing. He simply held up the papers. Rick's face turned cautious. What's that? Proof, Isaiah said softly. Of everything you've been doing. Rick scoffed. What are you talking about? I run this place. Efficiently. You think you're some kind of hero temp, poking around on the computers? Isaiah stepped forward. You've used this system to cut lives apart. Not just hours, lives. You turned their schedules into threats. Rick narrowed his eyes. What's your deal, man? You're just a temp. Stay in your lane. Isaiah stared at him, his voice calm and cold. I built this lane. There was a beat of silence. Rick blinked. Isaiah pulled off his name tag. Isaiah Brooks, founder, CEO. Rick's mouth parted slightly, coffee cup trembling in his hand. No, that's not. Isaiah stepped closer. And I've seen enough. Rick staggered back. Wait, there's gotta be a mistake here. I was just following metrics. Cutting hours is policy. No, Isaiah snapped. Cutting hours for retaliation is abuse. Padding bonuses is fraud. This isn't management. This is manipulation. Rick looked around, almost panicked. You can't do this. They corporate approved. They approved the numbers you fed them. Isaiah cut in. I know. I signed them. Rick's voice fell into a whisper. Look, I was just trying to meet targets. That's what you people want. I wanted leadership, Isaiah said. You gave me fear. He stepped aside and opened the office door. Hand over your keys. Rick didn't move. You're done, Isaiah said. Reluctantly, Rick reached into his pocket and dropped the key ring into Isaiah's hand. The metal clinked like a gavel in an empty courtroom. Isaiah held his gaze. Leave. Rick turned slowly, his footsteps retreating down the hall. Isaiah stood in the office alone, breathing slowly. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired. But behind that tiredness was something steady clarity. He stepped out into the main floor. The store had gone silent, eyes turning toward him from every aisle. Jalen, Linda, Jorge, even Nina, standing at register 4, her hands still resting on the counter. I need to speak with everyone, Isaiah said. Break room, 10 minutes. No one spoke, but one by one, they moved, quiet, curious, a spark of something unspoken in their steps. It wasn't hope yet, but it was the start. The break room had never been this full. Folding chairs were pulled from storage, plastic crates were flipped upside down to serve as seats, and some employees stood along the wall with arms crossed and eyes cautious. No one spoke. No one scrolled their phones. The air held a taut stillness, like something long withheld was about to crack open. Isaiah stood at the front of the room, the keys from Rick still clutched in his left hand. He looked across the faces of his staff, some young, some worn by years on their feet, some visibly exhausted, and some just barely hanging on. These were not just numbers on a chart. They were his people, and he had failed them. My name, he began, is Isaiah Brooks. A small ripple moved through the room. Murmurs. Jalen straightened. Linda blinked. Nina, still standing near the door, went pale. Isaiah nodded slowly. I'm the founder of Brooksmart. Some of you may know the story. Some of you may not. I started this company 30 years ago with 6 crates of produce and a folding table outside a gas station in Montgomery. Back then, it was just me and a promise that no one who worked beside me would ever be treated like they didn't matter. He let the words hang, heavy with memory and shame. But somewhere along the way, I got lost. I became the man who read quarterly summaries instead of faces, who approved schedules without seeing the lives behind them. And because of that, I didn't see what was happening here. I didn't see what Rick turned this place into. He held up the printed shift logs and notes, thick with red ink and annotations. I saw the documents, the schedules manipulated to punish, the hours used as weapons, the bonuses extracted from your sacrifices, and the silence you've been living with. Jalen swallowed hard. Someone near the back exhaled shakily. I can't undo what's already been done, Isaiah continued, softer now. But I can begin by doing something that should have happened a long time ago. He turned toward the front row, where Nina now sat, arms folded tightly across her chest, as if shielding herself from what might come next. Nina Matthews, Isaiah said, his voice steady. I'd like you to accept the position of assistant manager at this store, effective immediately, with full authority. A stunned silence fell over the room. Nina didn't move. A few people turned toward her. Marcia raised her brows. Linda leaned forward slightly. Jalen looked like he'd stopped breathing altogether. Nina stared at Isaiah, confusion swimming in her tired eyes. Me? He nodded. You. She shook her head slowly, voice a whisper. I've been written up. Rick said I was unstable, that I couldn't be trusted to lead. Isaiah stepped closer, his tone gentler now. You came to work every day. You trained new staff, covered for others, smiled through your tears, and gave customers kindness even when the job gave you nothing back. You stood your ground without violence. That's not weakness. That's leadership. Nina looked around the room, almost unsure this moment was real. I don't know if I can. You already did, Isaiah replied. All I'm doing is putting the title where it belongs. Slowly, Nina stood. Her hands trembled slightly. She met Isaiah's eyes, then looked out across the faces of her co-workers. No one laughed. No one doubted her. What she saw staring back at her was not pity, but quiet relief, like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut. If you believe in me, she said quietly, I'll try. Isaiah smiled, the weariness in his shoulders softening for the first time in days. Don't try, Nina. Lead. He turned back to the others. As of tonight, this store is under review. We'll be restoring hours, restructuring shifts, and auditing every policy Rick ever touched. But more than that, he paused, scanning the room. We're restoring dignity. Jalen raised his hand, hesitated, then spoke. What if things go back to how they were when you leave? Isaiah answered without missing a beat. They won't, because I'm not leaving until we make sure they don't. And more importantly, because I'm not the only one leading anymore. He turned to Nina again. You won't be alone. There was a silence. Then, slowly, one clap. It came from Marcia. Then Linda joined in. Then Jorge. Soon, the whole room was applauding, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with the kind of quiet, respectful acknowledgement that said, We see you. We're with you. Nina blinked fast. Isaiah stepped aside, letting her stand where he had stood. She looked around the break room, eyes full but shoulders taller than they had been just yesterday. I know what this job has cost you, she said. I've lived it, and I won't let that continue. Starting tomorrow, we rebuild this store not for numbers, but for people. For us. Isaiah stepped back, watching her no longer a woman behind a register, but a leader in her own right. After the meeting, as employees filtered out, Isaiah remained behind. The break room emptied slowly. Nina lingered by the whiteboard, erasing Rick's outdated notes, her hand moving with quiet determination. Jalen came up beside Isaiah. She's really gonna run the place? Isaiah nodded. She's already been running it. Now she gets the title too. Jalen looked down, then back at Isaiah. What about me? What about you? I've always wanted to do more. Help customers, train people, but Rick said I was too soft. Isaiah studied him for a moment. I think soft is exactly what this place needs right now. He clapped a hand on Jalen's shoulder. Talk to Nina. She's building a new floor team, and I have a feeling she'll want you at the front. Jalen gave a quiet smile, the kind that had been missing for far too long. Later that night, Isaiah stood alone in the parking lot, looking up at the faded Brooksmart sign glowing dimly against the Alabama night sky. It wasn't fixed yet, not completely, but the store had taken its first real breath in months. And for the first time in a long time, Isaiah didn't feel like the only one trying to keep it alive. The door to the manager's office clicked shut behind Nina with a soft thud. For a moment, she stood still in the dim light, fingers resting lightly on the doorknob, as if unsure whether she was allowed to let go. The air inside still carried the faint scent of Rick cheap cologne, stale coffee, and something intangible, cold and controlling. She stepped forward slowly, like someone walking into a room that used to belong to someone cruel. The desk sat at the center, slightly crooked, its surface still cluttered with half-empty pens, old time-off forms, and a notebook with Rick's spidery handwriting scrawled across every page. The black leather chair let out a low creak as she sat down. For years, this had been the seat of fear. Now, it was hers. She didn't turn on the computer right away. Instead, she reached for the notebook and opened it. Page after page held Rick's notes like scars. Cut Linda's hours, talks too much. Jalen watched closely. Sensitive. Jorga keep away from high traffic zones. Limp noticeable. Marcia dangerous. Likes to stir. And under her own name. Nina, unstable, keep isolated, no promotions. She closed the notebook and pushed it away, as if discarding a poisonous snake. Her breath trembled, but she didn't cry. Not now. She had done enough of that. Today was for something else. She powered on the monitor and logged into the scheduling system. The screen flickered to life, showing the current week's shifts in a color-coded mess. Back-to-back night shifts for Linda, scattered, unpredictable hours for Jorge, only weekend closings for herself. It wasn't a schedule, it was a punishment grid. She took a deep breath, then clicked, Create New. A blank sheet, a new beginning. She began typing. Prioritize single parents for consistent morning shifts. No overnight shifts longer than 3 consecutive days. Staff with school-aged children should be consulted before scheduling doubles. Night shifts must include breaks and backup coverage. If someone requests an adjustment due to illness, medical care, or family needs, log it and respect it. No retaliation, ever. Her fingers hesitated for a second before adding the last line. If there are concerns about any shift, come see me. My door is open. She saved the draft and stared at the screen. It wasn't perfect. There would be gaps, not enough coverage some weekends. The store might have to hire 2 more part-timers to fill in the new balance. But this was something human. She leaned back and let out a long breath. Then, reaching into the drawer, she pulled out a roll of Scotch tape and a blank sheet of paper. She wrote in thick, black strokes, "Schedules exist to support, not to punish." Beneath it, "Every hour is a piece of someone's life. Handle with care." She taped the sheet to the wall above the desk. Then she stood and looked at the office from the doorway. Same 4 walls, same desk, same dusty light fixture overhead. But now, it didn't feel like Rick's office anymore. It felt like a promise. Later that afternoon, just 5 minutes before the end of the last shift, Nina sent out a message through the internal staff app. "Quick meeting in the break room. 10 minutes max. Please come if you can." One by one, the employees filtered in. Some still in aprons, some wiping hands with paper towels, some nervous, others curious. Jalen leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. Marcia took a seat up front. Linda stood off to the side, rubbing her temples but listening. Nina stood at the front, her palms resting lightly on the counter, still chalky from shelf dust. Her voice was quiet at first. "I know these last few months have been hard. Some of you feel like you've had to beg just to be seen, or heard, or even scheduled like human beings. I've been there. I was there." She paused, letting that land. "I used to think staying silent was the only way to survive here. But I was wrong, and I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner, for not standing with you when you needed someone." A hush fell. Jalen looked down at his shoes. Linda's arms uncrossed. Jorge leaned forward. Nina's voice grew steadier. "Starting today, the schedule will reflect reality. Your lives matter. Your time matters. If your kid gets sick, you won't be punished. If you need flexibility, you'll get respect. And if I make a mistake, because I probably will, you can come talk to me, directly. Or, if needed, go to Mr. Brooks. You are no longer alone." There was a beat, then a single clap. From Marcia, then 2 more, from Jorge and Linda. Then the whole room, not loud or dramatic, but like a gentle tide washing over the walls. A sound not of celebration, but of relief. After the meeting, the staff lingered. Some chatted quietly in pairs. A few asked if they could check the new schedule in advance. Nina nodded and told them to stop by the office before they clocked out. She remained at the break room doorway, eyes searching. She spotted Jalen walking toward the back with a crate of shelf tags. She called out, "Jalen?" He turned, a little surprised. "Yeah? Something wrong?" She walked over slowly. "You helped Linda train the new guy today, right?" Jalen scratched his neck. "Kinda. I'm not great with people, though." Nina gave a soft smile. Rick used to say the same thing about me. Jalen looked up at her. I've watched you, Jalen. You're calm. You listen. You don't interrupt. That's exactly what we need more of at the front. He blinked. You mean, I want you on the floor, she said, helping customers and helping the next new hire learn what real leadership looks like. Jalen stood quiet for a moment, then nodded, slowly, like someone who had once believed they'd never be chosen. Okay, he whispered. Yeah, I'd like that. As the night settled, and the last customer pushed her cart through the sliding doors, the store exhaled. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. Something had shifted. The old weight was gone. The air moved freer, softer, and at the center of it all was Nina, standing behind the counter not as the girl who once cried in silence, but as the woman who'd chosen to rebuild something better, one line of a schedule at a time. The next morning, sunlight streamed in through the glass doors of Brooksmart, casting long golden beams across the polished floor. It wasn't perfect, there were still scuffed tiles and faded sale banners, but there was something unmistakably different in the air. The silence that once hung like a thick curtain had begun to lift. It was replaced by small things, soft greetings, eye contact, a lightness in how people walked between aisles. Nina stood at the front of the store, organizing the impulse buys near the register. A small child tugged at a stuffed giraffe, and Nina bent down with a smile. That one's my favorite too, she said, offering the little girl a sticker shaped like a star. The child beamed. The mother gave Nina a surprised, grateful look. From the other end of the store, Jalen watched. He'd traded his usual backroom tasks for a light blue apron that read, Customer Care. His posture was more open today. He waved awkwardly to Nina. She waved back. Around noon, Isaiah entered through the side entrance, dressed casually but without the disguise of a name tag or cover story. He moved with quiet steps through the aisles, not to inspect but to observe, to feel. That was something he'd forgotten in recent years. Leadership wasn't about tracking data. It was about tracking hearts. Near the produce section, he saw Linda laughing softly with a customer who'd asked for fresh cherries. Jorge was assisting a woman struggling to lift a bulk bag of cat litter into her cart. Jalen was explaining how the new self-checkout kiosk worked to a teenager trying it for the first time. And Nina. She moved from station to station like the spine of the whole place, gentle, attentive, steady. At 4:45 p.m., just before the changeover to the evening shift, Nina sent out another message through the staff app. Team meeting. Break room. 10 minutes. This one matters. When the team gathered, the energy was noticeably different. People sat without the slumped shoulders. They weren't just waiting. They were ready. Nina stood at the front again. This time her hands didn't tremble. Her voice didn't waver. Thank you for coming, she began. And thank you for trusting me enough to stay. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. I want to be honest with you all. I've never led anything before. Not officially. I've trained people, yes. I've covered shifts. I've tried to hold it all together. But leadership? That's new to me. And terrifying. A few people nodded gently. But I think leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about listening. About admitting when you've been silent too long. About choosing people over pride. She took a breath. Rick ran this store by fear. I saw it. I lived it. And I let it happen because I thought surviving was enough. I thought keeping my head down was the only way to keep my job. But I was wrong. She turned slightly, glancing at Isaiah, who stood near the doorway, arms folded, eyes calm. I found my voice because someone listened. Someone with the power to change things stopped pretending everything was okay and decided to feel what was actually happening. She looked back to her team. So now I'm asking you to help me keep this going. Not just with better schedules or cleaner aisles, but with the culture, the spirit, the why. She took a sheet of paper from her pocket and unfolded it. Her voice grew steadier, sharper. These are the 5 new rules for this store. They're simple, but they matter. She read them aloud. 1. We listen first. 2. No retaliation ever for speaking the truth. 3. Everyone's schedule must reflect their life, not punish it. 4. Feedback is not a threat, it's fuel. 5. We protect each other. That's not optional. The room was quiet, not from fear, but from something deeper, conviction. Linda raised her hand. What happens if corporate pushes back? Nina nodded. Then we bring them here. Let them meet the people behind the shifts. Let them see what we've built. And if that doesn't work, she glanced at Isaiah again. We go higher. Isaiah stepped forward. I built this company to prove that business and dignity can live in the same place. If anyone tries to threaten that balance again, they'll answer to me. Jorge leaned forward. So this is real? This isn't just a phase? Nina's voice didn't hesitate. It's real. As real as your rent. As real as the baby Jalen's sister is raising. As real as the tears I cried behind Register 4. And we're not going back. Jalen smiled quietly. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Linda, then Marcia, then the entire room. But this wasn't the awkward applause of corporate briefings. It wasn't polite or forced. It was real, earned, alive. After the meeting, Nina sat in the manager's office, her hands still tingling. The room didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt lived in, purposeful. She opened the employee portal and added 2 new shift zones for a young single mom named Charla who'd applied for Sundays only, and another for a part-time student needing consistent evenings. As she clicked approve, she felt something swell in her chest. This wasn't about scheduling anymore. It was about repair, restoration, redemption. Then she opened a blank page and began typing something new for the team's next orientation packet. If your paycheck feeds your child, your voice feeds this company. She smiled to herself. It wasn't policy language. It wasn't from a textbook, but it was true. Outside, the lights of the store glowed warm as the sun dipped below the edge of town. Isaiah watched from the far end of the parking lot, leaning against the hood of his car. He didn't need to go back inside, because this time, the right person was already standing at the front. By the end of the week, Brooksmart felt like a different store. Not louder, not faster, just warmer. Customers noticed it first. An elderly woman at Register 3 smiled and said, "Feels like the old days in here." Nina, standing nearby, smiled back and nodded, though her eyes brimmed with quiet emotion. She knew exactly what that meant. Jalen now worked out front, stationed near the self-checkout lane. He wore a lanyard with a new tag that read, Team Support, and though he still tugged nervously at the edge of his shirt sometimes, his posture had changed. He moved with confidence, with purpose. Earlier that day, he'd helped a frazzled father calm a toddler mid-tantrum, just by crouching down and handing the child a free sticker shaped like a pineapple. No one told him to do it. He just did. Linda had a new Schedule 3 evening shifts, 2-day shifts. It allowed her to make her son's basketball games for the first time in months. She'd even come in wearing bright yellow earrings shaped like smiley faces, a detail small enough that no one might have noticed a week ago. Nina did, and she told her they looked good. Isaiah returned to the store the following Tuesday. No baseball cap this time. No name tag. He didn't need to blend in anymore. The team knew who he was now, but they also understood why he had come in the first place and, more importantly, why he hadn't left. As he walked the store, he saw the subtle evidence of change. Shelves properly fronted, customer service counters with actual smiles behind them. Even the old community board near the entrance updated with local event flyers, and a flyer for a new parenting support group pinned up by Marcia. At the center of it all was Nina. She wasn't hiding behind a register anymore. She moved between departments with a clipboard in one hand and a small bag of trail mix in the other, her fuel, as she joked to Jalen. But more than that, she brought something intangible to the room, a kind of steadiness, the kind of presence that made people want to straighten their backs a little, smile a little more, and feel, even if just for a second, proud of where they worked. That afternoon, she found herself walking through the frozen foods section when she noticed Jorge staring at the back wall near the freezers. He held a schedule in his hand, his brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" she asked, walking over. Jorge turned, a little startled, then nodded quickly. "Yeah, I saw I have Friday and Saturday morning this week. It's just my daughter has her piano recital Saturday at 10. Nina paused, then smiled. "Thanks for telling me. We'll adjust it." He blinked. "Just like that?" She tilted her head. "That's the whole point of rebuilding this thing, right?" He nodded slowly, then said, almost too quietly, "Rick would have written me up just for asking." She looked him in the eye. "Well, Rick's not here, and you are." Later that evening, Nina sat in the manager's office going over the updated schedule. The chair didn't creak anymore. Someone had come in and replaced the old wheels without telling her. Probably Jalen. She made a mental note to thank him. On her desk sat a new folder labeled Employee Feedback, Confidential. In it were folded slips, some with suggestions, others just anonymous notes of gratitude. One in particular caught her attention. The handwriting was small and slanted. "I used to cry on my lunch break in the bathroom, not because of the work, because no one saw me. Now, you do. Thank you." She folded the note and slid it into her top drawer. She didn't know who wrote it. She didn't need to. What mattered was that someone who had once felt invisible now felt seen. At 7:55 p.m., as the last of the customers trickled out, Nina walked to the front to help close out the registers. She spotted Jalen near lane 4, helping an older customer bag her groceries. The woman thanked him twice, then turned to Nina and said, "That young man has a heart. You can feel it." Nina nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You really can." After the store closed and the automatic doors sealed with a soft hiss, she lingered for a moment at the front, watching her team clean up. Linda was humming along to the soft store music while wiping down the fruit display. Jorge was double-checking freezer temps like it was second nature. Jalen was gathering returns, chatting with a new hire named Marcus, patiently explaining how to flag inventory discrepancies. Isaiah stood near the exit, watching. She hadn't seen him come in, but she wasn't surprised to see him now. Their eyes met. He gave a small nod, as if to say, "It's yours now." She walked over, arms crossed, smile easy. "Didn't think you'd stop by today." He shrugged. "Didn't think I'd see this place like this so soon." She looked around. "It's not perfect." He nodded. "It's better than perfect. It's honest." She hesitated, then said, "Some days, I still panic. Some days I think I'm one mistake away from being right back where I was." Isaiah studied her face for a moment. Then he said with quiet conviction, "You're not here because I gave you this opportunity. You're here because you claimed it every single time you showed up when life tried to knock you down." She blinked, surprised by the weight in his voice. "I used to think I was just a replaceable part," she whispered. Isaiah shook his head gently. "You're the reason I believe this company deserves to keep going." They stood in silence for a moment, as the lights dimmed slightly, signaling closing hours. Then Nina turned back toward the registers. "I'll lock up," she said softly. Isaiah stepped out the front doors without another word. He didn't need to say goodbye. He wasn't gone. Inside, Nina stood at lane 4, her old laney end, looked at it not with dread, but with a strange kind of affection. This was where everything had broken. And somehow, it was also where everything had begun again. She flipped off the register light, straightened the mat beneath her feet, and walked back to the office, her steps sure, her hands steady. Outside, the wind shifted gently through the trees. The stars blinked into view. Brooksmart wasn't just recovering. It was alive. The following week began with unexpected visitors. On Monday morning, just after the sun cracked over the horizon and sent golden light spilling across the storefront windows, Nina arrived to find a black SUV parked in the loading zone. At first, she assumed it was a vendor, maybe someone from the new produce supplier. But when she stepped out of her car and caught sight of the sharply dressed man standing beside it, clipboard in hand, phone pressed to her heart sank. Corporate. She barely had time to unlock the side door before two more individuals stepped out of the vehicle. One was a tall, pale man with silver-rimmed glasses. The other, a woman in her 50s with tightly pinned hair and a purse that seemed more expensive than Nina's entire wardrobe. Both wore visitor badges. "Excuse me," the woman called. "Are you the acting manager here?" Nina turned, taking a slow breath. "Yes, I am. Nina Carter." The man checked his clipboard. "We're from Regional Oversight. I'm Ben Crenshaw. This is Miss Ellison. We'll be conducting a full procedural audit today." Nina nodded. "Of course. Right this way." She led them inside, her mind racing. She had nothing to hide, but that didn't stop the old fear from curling in her stomach like smoke. These were the people who could shut down stores, who could reverse progress with a few pen strokes and polite emails. But by midday, something unexpected happened. As Nina escorted them through departments, the auditors began to soften. In produce, Linda cracked a joke about mislabeled kiwis and had Miss Ellison laughing. In the break room, Jalen quietly greeted the visitors, offered them coffee, then went back to helping Marcus fill out his benefits enrollment. The shelves were stocked. The store was spotless. The staff? Present, kind, engaged. More than anything, the store felt different. It buzzed not with anxiety, but with dignity. "Miss Carter," Ben said as they reached the manager's office. "I'll admit, when we received the tip about a culture breakdown at this location, we prepared for the worst. But this store is running better than most in your district." Nina raised an eyebrow. "You got a tip?" Miss Ellison nodded slowly. "A formal complaint was filed last month. Anonymous. Claimed that management here was failing to meet employee and customer standards. It triggered this review." Nina didn't say anything at first. Her chest tightened, thoughts flicking back to Rick, the ex-manager. She hadn't heard from him since he stormed out. She hadn't needed to. Ellison stepped closer, her voice lower. "We've reviewed the surveillance logs. The prior manager's behavior was troubling. There were patterns of coercion, disregard for policy, and manipulation of records. Frankly, it should have been flagged sooner." Nina crossed her arms, steadying herself. "It almost broke us." "But it didn't," Ellison replied. "You rebuilt it." She looked down at the folder in her hand, then added, "Miss Carter, we'd like to recommend you for permanent store manager status effective immediately. It'll go through final HR review, but I've already marked the box." Nina didn't move, not at first. The words didn't register like they should have. They landed softly, like snow. Thank you," she finally said. "I wasn't expecting this today." "You earned it," Ellison said simply. When the auditors left later that afternoon, Nina walked the store floor as if seeing it for the first time again. Everything looked familiar, yet everything had changed. Near the back, she spotted Jalen reading aloud to a little boy in the toy aisle, somehow turning a coloring book into a story. She let herself watch for a moment. No training manual could teach what that boy already knew instinctively. She made her way to the employee board and pinned a fresh paper to the cork. "Team Celebration Friday, pizza, stories, and gratitude." Beneath it, she scribbled, "You built this." On Friday night they stayed late. The office lights stayed on longer than usual, and the break room smelled like pepperoni, plastic cups clinking, stories shared over soda. Linda talked about her son's winning shot at the game. Jorge brought in photos of his daughter's piano recital. Even Marcia, quiet and reserved, laughed out loud when Jalen tried, and failed, to tell a knock-knock joke. At one point, Isaiah arrived this time in jeans and a hoodie, blending in like he had the first time. No title, just a man walking into a room of people who had found something worth fighting for. He didn't interrupt. He just watched, leaning against the doorframe. Nina joined him eventually, leaning her shoulder gently into his. "Funny," she whispered. All it took was everything falling apart. Isaiah gave a small, tired smile. Sometimes that's what it takes to see what matters. They stood in silence for a moment, just listening. The chatter, the clink of pizza boxes, the laughter, even the soft hum of the vending machine, it all pulsed with something more than sound. It pulsed with life. As people started packing up, Jalen approached Nina with a folded piece of paper. "Miss Nina, I wanted to give you this." She opened it. A hand-drawn card. A sketch of the store, windows lit, people inside smiling. At the top, in large letters, "You saw us." Her voice caught in her throat. She knelt to his level. "Jalen, this is beautiful." "It's true," he whispered. "You didn't just help me. You helped everyone." She didn't know what to say, so she hugged him. Later, as she turned off the last light, she paused by the register. Lane 4. This time, she didn't flinch when she looked at it. She simply placed a hand on the counter, not to hold herself up, just to remember. What we choose to build matters. And sometimes, the things that nearly broke us become the reason we rise. She stepped out into the night. The doors slid closed behind her, but nothing about them felt final. Because some stories don't end with a door shutting. They begin when someone finds the courage to open one.